Hello, everybody, and welcome to AJE's Special Education Thursday. We have a very exciting episode this week, I guess. Again, you're going to have me and Tamiesha talking about OSSE-DOT, which has been the topic of a couple of episodes lately. But we're
Yes.
very lucky today. We are joined by Kaitlin Banner, Kathy Zeisel, and Miss Crystal Robinson, who have some things to tell us about litigation that I know we're getting a lot of phone calls at our office about. So Tamiesha and I are going to have a little chat and we'll sort of go through and hopefully answer your questions and put you in a position where you feel a little bit more comfortable knowing what's going on. But I guess we always start with introductions and who are you and what's your role and what are you doing? And Kathy, where you got the short straw, you go first.
All right. Thank you all for hosting us today. I'm Kathy Zeisel. I'm a lawyer at Children's Law Center. I'm our Director of Special Legal Projects. And I am one of the lawyers representing parents and the ARC in the litigation today, that we're going to talk about today.
Ms. Robertson, you want to go next?
Sure, I can. Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Robertson. I have a nephew who I'm actually representing today.
And are you connected to this litigation at all?
I am connected to it.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. And Kaitlin, you want to tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kaitlin Banner. Really excited to be part of this conversation today to talk about this case. I'm the Deputy Legal Director at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, and also one of the lawyers representing Ms. Robertson and other parents in the case.
Exciting. I know you guys all know me, but I'm still Maria Blaeuer, Director of Programs and Outreach, and I am not a lawyer involved in this litigation. I'm here as host. And then Tamiesha, I'll let you remind everybody who you are.
I am Tamiesha Lawrence, parent first, but parent support specialist here at Advocates for Justice and Education. And I am also the training coordinator here.
Okay. Exciting. All right. So, Ms. Robertson, I see your name at the top of this, and then I see an et al. So, and I'll let whoever take this whoever wants to answer can, but Robertson et al. Kind of explain the et al. And then the VDC. Who is this? Who's involved and who's it against?
I think before we say who everyone else is, maybe Ms. Robertson could tell us a little bit about, her piece of this and why she's involved. And then I'm happy to talk about who the other plaintiffs are.
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. I am very much so involved because I do have a nephew who has autism. And almost in 2020, he had lost his mom, which is my sister. But I gained custody of him in 2020. And, he came to live with me directly after that. But I noticed that, him being, have the transportation that constantly it was a headache from the beginning. So the first year I kind of like dealt with the bus not coming on time, being late, they was just totally disrespectful of a kid with autism. So, I found my nephew really like panicking and, really being afraid that he won't be able to go to school. But at the time, I didn't have a car. So if the bus was late or it didn't arrive or, so he couldn't make it to school. So the first year I dealt with it, but then the next 2 years, I was like, now, I think that this is really child neglect because it was like they did not give you a call to forewarn you. So I reached out to the law center and the Children's Law Center, and they basically was asking me to monitor to see, what was happening. So I gathered all the information, reported it, and then, it all of a sudden the situation really got worse. It was to the point that they had no regards of, what this child was going through. They didn't respect it, they didn't understand it, and they just didn't care. The bus will be 2 hours late, an hour late. So I, really, really gotten involved, and I'm like, wait a minute. It's a lot of children, just kids that was basically going through the same thing that my nephew was going through. So that's why I gotten involved and pushed for him to get better services, better care, and the Law Center had helped me to do that, and very appreciative of that.
So Ms. Robertson is one of our plaintiffs who we work with, and I think we at Children's Law Center at Washington Lawyers Committee, I know you at AJE and all the parents out there know the story that Ms. Robertson shared with her nephew is probably similar to what a lot of parents out there have experienced with transportation. Marie, if you go to the next slide real quick, we have some individual clients. What we ended up doing at Children's Law Center, we've represented many, many, many individual clients over the years, but we came together with Washington Lawyers Committee, the ARC, and McDermott, Will & Emery, which is a law firm, to really say we have to think of another way to change OSSE transportation. We've tried through working together, we've tried through the council, we've tried through these individual cases, and we really need to approach this a different way. And so we began to work with individual clients who had stories like Ms. Robertson's, and these are the names of the individual clients who are in the what are called named plaintiffs. They're the names that are listed in the federal case that we filed. And we found an organizational client, which is the ARC of the United States, which is an organization that has members who are people and families of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as other kinds of disabilities, and who live in DC and have also, many of them have experienced issues with OSSE transportation. And so we started saying we need to file this as a class action, representing these named people as well as every other family of a student with a disability and students with disabilities who ride transportation or will ride transportation during the course of this case. So the names that you see are the names that will be in the litigation, but hopefully the litigation will cover the lawsuit. I keep saying litigation, the lawsuit, the case in court will cover everybody who takes transportation if the judge approves that.
And Kathy, I thought that I was the only one, but as I'm speaking with other parents, they have no idea about the help that they could get or what they are entitled to having a child with a disability.
Part of why we're doing this video today.
Yeah. And before we keep going, I want to flag something that you said, Kathy, and I also want to highlight something you said, Ms. Robertson, I'm sorry. You said if the judge approved, so it hasn't been approved as a class action yet. You filed it as a class, but it hasn't been approved. Is that what you were saying?
That's right. We've asked the judge to approve it as a class action. We hope that it will be approved, but it hasn't yet been approved.
And Ms. Robertson, I just wanted to highlight something you said that I think is so important. You talked about, well, you used the word headache, which I think everybody who watches this video will nod and resonate. I think, OSSE-DOT's a headache for a lot of families. But you also said the word disrespectful and disrespect a few times. And I wanted you to hear, and the people watching this video to hear, that that is something that a lot of families definitely experience. You know, it is not
Yeah,
okay that this is happening, and it's not okay that you can't rely on the bus. And it is fundamentally disrespectful.
yeah.
Appreciate you
I
framing it that way.
Yes, thank you. I use the word disrespectful because um, when you call to the parent center, um, they were very disrespectful, like the way that they speak to you. Um, what is your child name? You know, they answer the phone. They wouldn't say, "Hello, this is so and so. How may I help you?" It was an RC, you know, parent center. You know, what is your child name? What is the date of birth? Hold on. And you know, then they'll leave you on hold. When you call, first of all, to take you like 45 minutes to get in contact with them. And once you do get in contact with them, they're really disrespectful of how they speak with you. Um, the answers that they will give you, you were actually asked to speak with a supervisor or a manager. You were unable to speak with them. They'll take your name and your number, and the overseers would never return your phone call. So and even when I finally got in contact with the overseer, she was saying that she never received my the message, and I knew that that wasn't true because I've left several messages with her myself on the answering machine when you get transferred. So that's why I use the word disrespectful.
And I think it may be obvious from what we're talking about, Ms. Robertson's describing, and I think you hear her frustration, and you would hear it if any of the plaintiffs were here or any of the parents experiencing this or probably watching this would hear. But the case you asked who it's against the Office of the State Superintendent, or OSSE, who is responsible for providing the transportation in DC. We did it that way rather than against each of the individual school districts in DC, the local educational agencies, because OSSE does hold the responsibility and does operate the school bus system in DC for kids with disabilities who have transportation on their IEPs. And so we wanted to really make sure we were getting a system-wide solution. And so we sued the agency responsible that holds that system solution, which is OSSE.
Right. And it's captioned as Robertson et al. Because that includes all the families, the et al.
Right.
And then District of Columbia, it says DC instead of OSSE-DOT because District of Columbia is who you have to sue if you're suing OSSE-DOT.
That's right.
Right.
They're part of the District of Columbia, and the attorneys that are in federal court are from the Office of Attorney General, because the Office of Attorney General represents all of the DC agencies. So you won't see OSSE specific attorneys in court. You'll see attorneys from the Office of Attorney General.
Perfect. So we've got a couple more slides to tackle. But I wanted to remind folks we are going to, we've gotten through who are the plaintiffs, who's it against. We're going to talk a little bit about what families should know, the timeline, and then we are going to talk about that stipend program really briefly. So what was this complaint about, and what are you trying to get out of it? Like, why are we doing this? I think you've kind of talked a little bit about that already.
Yeah, so I think picking up on both what Kathy and Ms. Robertson said, this is a case that we brought to try to bring change for lots of folks, for everyone who's taking the bus in DC. We know that many people have experienced problems with the bus over the years, and some people experience problems sort of infrequently, but still have them, and some people experience problems much more frequently. We've talked to parents, some in the lawsuit, and some folks that we've just interviewed who've had problems for weeks on end or months on end when the bus has not shown up or not been consistent. And so really what we hope with this federal lawsuit is that we can get changes made to the whole system of transportation. So it's not just about fixing the bus for one student or for 5 students, but how do we sort of take a look at the whole system of how they provide transportation and make changes to ensure that this kind of disrespect, using Miss Robertson's, I'm sorry, information and language doesn't continue to happen to parents. So some of the things that we think are really important for the district to address. So one is to make sure that they have enough buses and vans, and also the right types of buses and vans to serve the students in the district. So that might mean having a van that has the right child safety restraint systems, that has the right way to secure a wheelchair for a student who's a wheelchair user, that has the right number of seats for the students that it's serving, sort of all of that type of thing. So making sure that we have the right fleet, the right number of vehicles. We want to make sure that the district is measuring and capturing and fixing performance time. So we know right now that one of the biggest problems for parents and for students is that the buses are not coming at a reliable time, and they're not dropping students off in the afternoon at a reliable time. And that has real implications for families. And so we want the district to be meticulously tracking when buses are arriving at students' homes, when they're arriving to school, and when they're arriving back to students' homes in the afternoon, and then be able to use that data to correct problems. So if the fact is that there's always traffic on that route, how do we deal with that? If there's too many students on this bus route to get everybody there on time, how do we deal with that? So using that data to really help improve the system. We want to make sure that there is the right staffing, that there's enough bus drivers, but also that there's enough attendants and nurses and other aides on the buses to serve students. Students with disabilities, as I'm sure everyone listening knows, can have really individualized needs. And so we want to make sure that we have the right staffing in place so that every student is safe on the bus and gets what they need. We think that the district's technology needs a big upgrade. We know that you are able to track where your food is if you order off of Uber Eats. You're able to track where the metro is if you're taking metro. There's no reason that parents shouldn't also be able to know where their child's bus is, when it's coming, when it's late. And right now, that's something that we can't do. And I know that that's really hard on parents and families when they can't find that information on a real-time basis. Ms. Robertson also mentioned some of the problems with communication. The Parent Resource Center, as folks might know, sort of exists to answer questions and to problem solve for parents, but it's often not working the way that we want it to. And we want to make sure that parents are getting the right amount of information, that they know when their bus is going to be late or delayed. If their child's bus is being changed, if they're going to have a new driver or a new route, parents should get plenty of notice about that and be able to work with their children and with their schools and with OSSE to make sure that that works for them. We also know, and this has been the experience of one of our clients, that communication has to be in parents' native language if they understand it. So oftentimes what we see is that OSSE is only sending out alerts in English, and that doesn't work for every family. And so we need to make sure that we're being respectful of people's language needs. And then the tracking and use of data I sort of talked about throughout, but we want to make sure that there's really strong systems in place so that the communication between the parents, between the schools, between OSSE, between the bus drivers, all of that is crystal clear so that everyone gets to where they're supposed to be when they're supposed to be there. And so all of these things we think would really make a difference in how families experience transportation and students experience transportation. And we're hoping that the judge will agree with us and make sure that these changes get made. The other thing that we are asking for in this court case is that students receive compensatory education for the time they've missed from school because of the transportation failures, and that families get reimbursement for the times they've had to drive their student to school or take their student to school via a private car or the bus or the metro, because we know that that's an expense that parents are not supposed to have to take on, and yet they've had to so often over the last couple of years.
I love the fact that you talk about systemic relief and then what individual families get, because I know that, and we talk about this all the time with families at HAE, you know, compensatory education and reimbursement is never as good as getting it right the first time. So I kind of feel like what you're saying is you're trying to help them get it right the first time. So we don't have to keep doing this makeup stuff, which I appreciate. So there's a motion I hear. A preliminary motion? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so we filed preliminary injunction is just kind of a fancy way of saying we think there's like an emergency need to get things done now because federal court cases move super slowly. And if we just let it run at its normal course of action in like 2 years, we might be in court kind of figuring things out, or a year. And we said we don't want to wait that long. We want to try to get something going before the start of next school year so that kids don't start at the beginning of next school year with routes that don't work again. So we filed something before the court saying we would like action before the start of the school year. We can't do this. We provided declarations from our clients, from people who aren't our clients, talking about how there's problems with OSSE transportation. We provided declarations from 3 different experts talking about problems with transportation, harms to students who have special education needs from problems with transportation. And we asked that a monitor be appointed by the court to kind of oversee this piece of it. We're right now waiting for the district's response to our motion, which is due this week. And we're hoping that, then we're hoping that we'll get some movement on this motion after that. So that's where we are right now.
So I want to kind of really clarify something you said.
Yeah.
You talked about really slow, and then you said 2 years. I really want folks to understand, like, there's this preliminary injunction motion, which hasn't been ruled on yet, and the district hasn't responded yet, so they get to have a voice. Well, I'll just be really blunt. I get phone calls from families, and I know Tamiesha's gotten a very similar phone call, and they say, oh, hey, we saw on your website that there is this litigation filed. Like, it'll be better real soon, right? The bus is going to start coming. What's your thinking around timeline for when change is going to happen? When might you see something? I know you want something by the beginning of the start of next year, but I know it's not up to you.
Or if at all.
We are optimistic there will be change.
Okay.
We don't think that even if we get some changes before the start of next school year, it's not going to be the changes for the whole system. It'll be the start of changes. To set the stage, the DC was already under federal court supervision for transportation for almost 20 years, from 1996 to 2014, before they got out of federal court supervision last time. We do not want to be in another 20-year case. So we are hoping that we can move faster and learn some of the lessons we learned last time about what needs to be done to make it work. We already know the tech exists. We can identify what needs to be done. It's not such a mystery as it was last time, and technology has gotten a lot better than it was in the 90s. I don't think it's such a mystery of how to do it. It's just getting it done. And so that's the piece that needs to happen. But I don't want people to think that even if we win this motion, the beginning of next school year is going to be super smooth and everything will be fine from there on out, because that seems pretty unlikely. I think that we should expect, even if things are going well, it will be a while before we see the transportation system where we all think it should be, realistically, because even with great intentions and every person on every part of this working on it, we didn't get into this. It's been a while getting it into the mess that we're in now, and it'll just be a while to get it straightened out. And like I said, the court systems, move slowly. It's part of the reason it took us a while to get to deciding to use a court case, because court is not a fast solution for problems.
Kathy, can I ask a question? You said that you don't want another supervision. Can I ask what that supervision looks like?
Oh, I don't mind another supervision. We do want that. We just don't want to be for 20 years.
Right, but so when I hear
what is a monitor?
Yeah, like when I hear supervision, I see, like you said, monitoring and
Yeah,
knowing that they're being watched and they're trying to make it, if the supervision, when somebody's
we are
watching
asking
the
for
job.
that.
So
we do want that.
don't
We
to be
want a
20
third party to be appointed by the court to come in and be able to review OSSE's work and say, are you, like, everybody agrees on standards, or the court set standards, or the monitor set standards in agreement with everybody, and like in the last case, it was like they had to have a 94% on time rate. There was a 60-minute ride time limit within DC and a 90-minute ride time without DC. Were just some of the, like, there's many pages of standards they had to meet. Absenteeism for bus drivers, rates, like staffing rates, GPS tracking, all that kind of stuff in the last case. And I can imagine similar standards eventually being set here among others. And just to address a lot of the specific problems, and then a monitor, a third party being appointed by the court, and then issuing reports to the court about the compliance levels of the district. It allows everybody to have a neutral party to say what's really going on, rather than relying on the district just to self-report, or relying on us to come somehow like kind of guess what's going on, and we don't really have the ability to do that.
And what's a declaration?
That's a great question. Kaitlin, you want to talk about that?
Sure. So declarations are sworn statements to the court. So it's sort of like evidence, except it's not live. It's something that somebody writes down. And so when we say we had expert and client and non-client declarations, what we mean is that parents, our clients and other parents wrote down statements. We helped them write statements about what happened to them and what their experience with OSSE transportation has been. And then we submitted those to the court so that the court can consider those in deciding whether or not there are problems, right? So our job as the lawyers here is to prove to the court that there are, sort of to prove two things. One is that there are serious problems that violate the law. And two, to prove that those problems are causing so much harm that the court should do something right now and not wait the sort of ordinary course of litigation or the ordinary length of a lawsuit, but should make some actions right now. And so we had to submit a lot of evidence to try to prove that. And then we also have what are called expert declarations, which is people who are transportation planning experts or child psychologists who could talk about, first of all, how do others, sort of what are the problems with DC? What are those big systemic problems that are causing the transportation to be late? Like what are, if you think about, right, the bus is showing up to my house late, or the bus is getting my kid to school late. There's probably 10 steps before that that need to be fixed so that that bus gets to you and gets to your kid's school on time. And so our experts helped us unpack those things, right? It's about how many bus drivers there are. It's about how many buses there are. It's about how the routes are planned, all those types of things. And then they also helped us understand sort of the harm that it caused. So we know from our clients and from parents, like the individual experiences about how harmful this is, but it's helpful for a court to also hear from like a child psychologist or an educational expert to say, you know, for students with disabilities, right, being off routine can be really problematic, and here's why. Or for students with disabilities, missing so much school is extra problematic, and here are all the reasons why. And so having that evidence to tell the judge both why this is a problem, why it's illegal, and then also why it's so bad that we need to fix it now, is where all those declarations came in.
I love the fact that you use the word evidence. I always like to remind folks, declarations don't mean that you're, providing a declaration doesn't mean that you're necessarily a client. You probably aren't a client. Very often you're a non-client, but you are providing evidence. So thank you. That was super clear.
Supporting information, and that helps to explain it better to them, because they sometimes call and assume that, oh, well, I'm going to be a part of this case because I have to provide this. And like, we have to elaborate often just so that it's understood that that they are contributor in the case. It's not that they're just not, not necessarily not a part of the case, like named people part of the case, but you're a contributor. You're a helpful contributor to provide supporting information.
I like the way you put that, contributing, which I'm going to skip this slide and go back. Because one of the questions we had is like, if parents want to share their story or, have a transportation issue, what can they do? How can they kind of support something that I think a lot of families really, really want to see, which is a more productive, functional OSSE, with transportation. That's something that a lot of people want. So how can parents support this? And then how can they share their story? What happens when they do that? That's a big one. What happens?
We would love for you, if you have any problems with OSSE transportation right now, to scan this QR code. You'll end up on Children's Law Center's website on a Share Your Story on a page that lets you share your story. If you scroll down, you'll see the it'll give you information about the case, and then you'll see a share your story button that you can press. And if you share your story with us, we want to just understand what's going on with transportation right now, because we just want to really get the most amount of information out there as possible. So just sharing it would be really valuable. Most likely we'll also follow up with you just to learn a little bit more. And we may ask you to provide one of those declarations, one of those statements that we could potentially use with the court to talk about what's happening. It won't make you one of those named plaintiffs. We already have the named plaintiffs in the case. And if we become a class action, everybody will be part of the case without your name being listed. Most likely, like, well, you'll get it some kind of, that will be a process later down. So you're sharing your declaration isn't going to change whether or not you become part of the case, but it will help us gather more information that is really, really valuable, and we really need it. So if you are a current parent or caregiver of somebody who takes OSSE transportation, or you're an adult student who takes OSSE transportation, we would love to hear from you and learn more about what's going on. You can also just learn more about the case by scanning this QR code in. We won't share any of this information without your permission. If you share the story, we're not going to be like, we got a great story from Maria, listen all about it. The information will just be shared among the litigation partners who are working on the case. It's not going to be shared further out than that.
And then just so folks know, in case you're not a QR code person, here are the links. The Share Your Story site. Children's Law Center has a great site with all the information there. And then we have a blog post where we talk about this litigation, some of our thoughts around it. And we link to the CLC article and the Share Your Story link, along with some media coverage. And all these will be in the comments when we post this to YouTube, which is where all of our things go. So you kind of answered the question, how can people, what happens when you share your story? What goes on? Is there anything parents can do now to support this litigation? Or, what about other community members? One of the things I've really tried to do a better job of in my work is to tell people what the next best thing they can do is, because people always tell me, they go, Maria, you tell me all these bad things and I want to help make it better. What can people do to help make this better while you all are in litigation? And then I have one more question for you.
Well, I'll start, but Kathy, feel free to jump in. So I think we already said it, sharing your story is so helpful for us. And I'll add sort of another reason why, which is that the district gets to come into court and share their story, right? And they have lots of information. They have the data, they have the, right, they have all the information, and we need to show why our story is the right one. And the more parents that speak out and the more parents that share their story, the more that we have as lawyers to go into court and say, here's what we're seeing, here's what's happening on the ground, here's what's happening every day. And that's really powerful for the judge and for us to understand and to be able to tell that story to the judge. I think other things to do, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your classmates, your children's classmates, share the information that you're learning today, share the information about the lawsuit. I think that's really important, that parents know that they're not alone, that this is not something that's just happening to them, and that there is a fight against it. I also think that just because this lawsuit is going on doesn't mean that you as a parent shouldn't continue to advocate for your own child and their transportation needs. And so that might mean, right, you should still go to IEP meetings and ask for what you need. You should still reach out to a lawyer if you think you might need a lawyer for your individual case. Like, this doesn't stop the regular legal processes that are happening. And so if you were thinking about, oh, I should like have an IEP meeting to talk about transportation problems, you should still do that. There's no reason to stop that because this case is happening. And so encourage people to kind of continue to reach out to organizations like Children's Law Center, like my organization, like Advocates for Justice in Education, to get advice and help for the problems that they're seeing, even though this case is happening. So those are some of the things I think that people can do to keep pushing on this.
That's a really good point. And I appreciate you saying that I think sometimes people see class action and they think, oh, I'm frozen. And you are never frozen. You can still advocate for your child. I had a quick question. Do you want to hear stories from families who, like Ms. Robertson said, decided the headache and the hassle and the kind of the chronic disrespect that it meant they kind of opted out of transportation? You know, my experience was so horrible. My kid was eligible for 3 years and I just decided it wasn't worth it to do that. Is that something that would be helpful to you?
I think it's worth them filling out the stories form. I wouldn't expect we're going to reach out to them immediately, but we may want to use those stories later on as we build up our case, especially if they opted out like more recently, not a few years ago. I think that could be helpful. Like, because often that happened after something like an incident happened, right? Like that the culmination of something led to it. So I think that can be helpful. Also, if people have been trying to get reimbursement and haven't been able to, like, that could be a helpful kind of story to hear where like some kind of problem has been happening in the system that way. And I also wanted to point out for individual folks trying to think about what to do for themselves, on that website where the QR code was, Maria highlighted the website, there's a kind of a self-help sheet about how people can seek compensatory education themselves if they don't want to wait for the litigation to go forward, or if they want to try mediation themselves to fix their bus problems right now. There's some information about how to do that to try to fix your current bus problems as well.
Perfect. And we link to that on our site as well. And I'll add that link again to the comments. And then this brings me to the question I told you at the beginning I'd ask. Speaking of opting out, you know, another big piece of news that came out around the same time was there's this stipend program that OSSE started offering. Are these things connected? Or does this impact that, or do they go together? Yeah. Anything to do with one have anything to do with the other?
So I think the short answer is no, they don't really have anything to do with each other. I think the stipend program is an attempt by OSSE to try to address some of the problems that they're seeing. And so we could, you know, talk probably a lot, all of us, about whether we think it's a good attempt or a bad attempt. But regardless, I think they're trying something out to see if it works. I think that what we know is that that stipend program won't fix the system. So even if some parents decide to use that stipend and that makes sense for their family, that is not going to, not everybody can do that, right? Not everybody has private transportation. Not everybody has a car. It's not enough money to get everybody to and from school. And so the system is going to continue to exist, and the system is still going to continue to be bad unless some action is taken to fix it. So the stipend, in my mind, might provide relief to some families. And if that works for your family, we encourage folks to use it, and if they have issues or want to talk about it, again, fill out that share your story form. We'd be interested to know how it's working. But I don't think it has anything to do particularly with this litigation. And what we envision is that we can come up with a whole system of transportation that works for every individual family's needs and can be individualized to what they need.
If I can layer one more thing there, I think it's also part of a systematic problem where OSSE is putting off the obligation to provide the transportation onto parents. Like the stipend, the reimbursement is all abdication of, it's all giving up the responsibility of OSSE to actually provide the transportation and saying, parents, you go do it, and we'll find a way to maybe compensate you maybe for some or all parts of the cost, rather than design a system that provides safe, effective, appropriate transportation for students. And we wouldn't need it to the scale that we're creating it at with the reimbursement and stipends if we actually had safe, effective, appropriate transportation for students.
And I love the fact that you highlighted that fact, because it is, I think, a burden shift, right? It is moving it onto the parent, and parents should be able to, rely on OSSE to do what they're supposed to do. Well, that brings us to our closing slide, which is how you can get in touch with us. I want to thank you all for being here, especially Mrs. Robertson. And always I want to thank Tamiesha for putting up with me and doing these with me. She keeps me honest and doesn't, she's wonderful. Here's that QR code again, and I'll drop that again in the link along with all of these links. Kaitlin, Kathy, before I ask Mrs. Robertson for any closing thoughts, do you have anything you want to share?
I just thank you guys, and thank you to any parents and caregivers watching this who share their stories with us.
Thank you.
I appreciate being here with you all today.
All right. Ms. Robertson, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am. Do you do you have any closing thoughts for other families?
Yeah, I understand that how stressful it can be, not having transportation on time for the scholars, but don't give up, keep working at it. Kathy and the team is doing a great job with making it better. My wish for the transportation is to have someone on the bus who can basically know how to deal with the children with the special needs. That's just my wish. One of the things that I am pushing for, because I'm a big advocate for my nephew, is to make sure that they're getting what they need on time, not missing education, not missing classes, and when not having them stressed out. Because when they are out of their element or things doesn't go right, it's definitely a problem for our scholars. So that's why I am not only advocating for my nephew, but for all of the children with special needs. I just want to see them getting a fair treatment, making sure that the parents do not have to stress about how their children are going to get to school and home safely. And I know it may seem like a headache, but don't give up. Reach out for help. There are parents out here, and I thought that I was the only one, but there are many parents out here who needs the help. So just stay positive. Talk your child through it, and y'all will get over it. You can get through it. And we're going to help the future scholars. And I'm glad to be a part of that. And I thank you guys for inviting me today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you all so much. I love, by the way, that you reminded folks that there's always somebody else going through it, I'll put stuff in the chat about ways we support families, and the ways CLC supports families. But that is definitely true. There's always somebody else going through the same thing.
And
So,
documentation is
ladies,
very important too. I want to make sure documentation is very important too. Like those, even though, those calls may seem a bit disrespectful, they're recorded. And so it keeps a track of every time you call, every time they're recorded. So every time you call, every time they're rude to you, every time you complain about the same thing over and over again, it's recorded. And so that's important to say that, hey, I called 10 times in the last month about the same thing, or, like it's important to have that documentation that there is a problem. Some parents just take the kid to school and it's sometimes counterproductive because there's no record of it. Like the bus that we don't know. If you don't complain about it, it just keeps going. So documentation is very important.
see, Tamiesha's been hanging out with us lawyers for too long. See what we've done to her, everybody? She's like, you got to document, you got to write it down. All right.
It's in my bio. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
All right. Well, see, that's what you get for hanging out with Special Education Thursday with AJE. Everything you need, and we're going to remind you to document. Thank you all again, though, for coming out today. I appreciate it. And as always, reach out if you've got questions. But thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.